previous video I touched upon a documentary by Dr. Jim Watson, who invented the DNA spiral, showed us what the shape of it was and the active ingredients, AGCT, the codon rungs on the DNA ladder, that sort of thing. And you're all aware of that from school, right? Okay, well, in the course of this old program, one of his leading students was actually filmed with a machine about as big as a microwave oven, producing man-made DNA like a sausage machine. It was literally doing that. And the machine's a bit bigger than a microwave, and it's got 4 pots on it producing man-made DNA, which can be injected into a newly fertilised embryo. I have to get our terminology right here. And surprisingly, the embryo doesn't care. It just sees the DNA in its own cytoplasm where it was injected and rapidly takes it on board, somehow moves it automatically by some kind of astonishing reflex process. It gets incorporated into your DNA as chromosome number 24. So, and it's also fully programmable, is what he said. He didn't specify how it was programmed. It might be minerals in the diet or tablets, medications, I'm not really sure. But what's this got to do with anything? Well, a lot. You can be afraid of it, and you can soon see that people with a lot of money and power could produce workforces and armies of super soldiers, people who can go without food longer, physically stronger, more resistant to stress, etc. I'll also tell you, you can also raise people's psychic abilities, likely by doing this. Because in case you don't know, people who are born psychics, born Gnostics, are made that way in families. I'm just talking to one at the moment called Michael, a very fascinating fellow. He's lived a lifetime of having a direct connection to God. And he's been shown all sorts of wonderful things. He's had a wonderfully adventurous life in the physical plane. He's about 70 now. And I'll give you another example of hereditary psychic abilities. The famous show Medium is based on a real woman who does exist, and she did work for the Phoenix Police Department, and she's got 3 daughters who are all psychic and all who talk to dead people, okay? All of them do that. Now, how come they, due to some genetic incident or accident, can talk to dead people and you can't? Well, there's a general safety built in, a kind of psychic membrane to stop your brain being flooded by the thoughts and impressions and visions of everybody else. You've got to have basically an isolation helmet on you, otherwise you couldn't function. You couldn't hear your own thoughts for those of others. So a near-death experience can cause that psychic helmet, that protective helmet, to be damaged, so that following an NDE you can become a psychic, a healer, you can become a Gnostic, you can be permanently changed. And that's the general rule with people who report sublime experiences during an NDE. Okay, so, and the most gifted psychics are often very traumatised people, traumatised right through their childhood, and they take brain damage. So it's kind of obvious that it's a logical conclusion that we've actually got protective helmets to make us all think we're individuals, we're all alone, and basically stop signals from getting into our heads from other people. If you think about it, we just couldn't function as a society. So we've all got to believe we're individuals so that we can function as individuals. Okay? Now, the business of genetic engineering, of being able to insert programmable DNA into fertilized embryos, is a link to another subject which is intensely interesting but requires an almost permanent dedication to following, and I know you guys haven't got the time for it. I've spent some time recently studying Linda Moulton Howe, who is one of the most engaging storytellers on the internet. I think you'll find, you might all agree. And I got her very latest 2017 broadcast where she's interviewed by someone who just lets her talk and explain things any way that she wants to. And it's very illuminating. And the business of genetic engineering and us being able to change our own inherited DNA is very much a part of what she was talking about. Now, she starts off with how did she get into the business of explaining things to everybody, which seemingly are owned and operated and controlled by the deep state, because we are basically kept anaesthetised in a state of great secrecy. I'm sure you're all aware of that, because only the brightest people watch my videos. I know that. In this 2017 interview, Linda Moulton Howe explains how she got into this strange business of explaining deep state secrets and interviewing many hundreds of people and studying the reports of alien abductees and that sort of thing. And she does the most riveting interview, and I'll link it for you, but I'll tell you what I've done. I've already gone through it, I've watched it twice, and I've got some timed notes where you can see to the minute where something is in this video, because I know you haven't got time to watch this. I know. But if you want to go to a specific part of the video, I'll tell you where it is in minutes, and that'll be in a panel below the video, okay? She started out as a medical doctor, I think, and somehow got into filmmaking. And she ended up making a documentary about a very strange phenomenon that she thought was local. 1979, I think it was televised on a local television station in the US, where she was collecting dozens and dozens and dozens of stories from ranchers who were really afraid to talk about things. Sheriffs who were afraid to talk about things, who wouldn't write things down and that sort of stuff. Vets who would be called in and refused to do autopsies on cattle mutilations. Okay, she became famous by making about a one and a half hour documentary on cattle mutilations. I'll give you a link to that. I have that. It's kind of fascinating. Linda Moulton Howe produced this documentary where she actually showed you photographs of autopsies and attending the site of dead cattle, which were showing up in significant numbers. They couldn't be written off to mere chance or strange attacks by predators, because the animals were nearly always drained of blood. They had strange wounds where genitals, nostrils, rectums were removed by some kind of coring tool with no blood at all. All drained of blood with these animals, and you keep that question in mind. Where does the blood go, and what on earth might it be used for? There is an answer from people who are across this and have followed it for years. But that made her famous on the world scene. As a result of airing this documentary on a television station in the US, she got letters from all over the world, from Central America, South America, Australia, even the Canary Islands. Even the Canary Islands reported cattle mutilations, you see. Now, I'll also give you a link which says that, wait for it, it's not a recent phenomenon. It may have been going on for a lot longer than we think, because Roman farmers, I've got a link for this, Roman farmers complained of cattle mutilations. So what could that mean? Cattle mutilations going on for that long length of time, millennia. So what is going on? How could it get this way, and how does it link to genetic engineering and programmable DNA in humans? Well, it all does come together for you. So Linda Moulton Howe, having made this documentary, becomes a sort of lightning rod for people to write letters explaining their experiences, including lost time and all that business, and waking up in a spaceship and feeling paralysed and all that sort of stuff. And she mentioned some exciting things that are going on, and some very frightening things which seem to be going on. And one of them was and I found this in another video adjacent to her, was that one lady was bilocated. She was able to stand outside a UFO she saw stealing cattle, right? Cattle go up in a beam of some sort, like a tractor beam, for want of a better phrase. They're operated on and then discarded later, often dropped nearby and sometimes landing in the top of telegraph poles. So they've obviously been dropped there, they didn't get there. And the animals have always been found with no tracks around the carcasses. No footprints, no tracks, no wheel tracks, no animal tracks, no animal droppings around them, okay? No trace of an animal being there to mutilate the cow when it died. No tracks of anything there killing the animal. And it gets more eerie when she relates in this video. She's wearing a nice pink hat, and to boost her credibility, you will give her more attention because of that, I hope. She says one particular case, the pathologist said, "Don't ever call me out to one of these autopsies again, you hear me?" And this was because he cut open the chest of a creature that was unmarked in the chest area and was groping around and pulled out something called the pericardium, which is kind of like a natural plastic bag, which lives around your heart, shielding it from infections, that sort of thing. And the vet was absolutely shocked because A, no blood came out of the chest. The pericardium was absolutely intact, and the heart had been removed from inside the pericardium. No split, no tear, no extraction hole. The heart was simply missing, and where it had been cut, there was no blood at all. So keep asking what happens to the blood, all right? It has been, there's some conjecture on that, which is kind of illuminating. But this is the vet that said, the pathologist, or whatever you call him, the necrologist, who said, "Don't ever call me out to one of these goddamn autopsies ever again, because if it gets out, I could lose my job, basically. I've got to, like an idiot in front of the media saying this animal died without a heart. Cause of death, missing heart, for Christ's sake. I'm going to look like a fool," right? So that's how angry people can get at the distressing findings you find at the site of these cattle mutilations. The 1 hour TV show in about 1979 made her a lightning rod for people sending letters and basically confidential things that they would never tell anybody else about alien abductions, cattle mutilations in very distant parts of the world. So it seems to be a global phenomenon, and it greatly puzzled her, which just made her more curious and more determined to get to the bottom of the issue, what was actually going on. She also seems to have become a conduit for slow release of information by the deep state. Now, the deep state is that entity that prevented Bill Clinton from finding out anything about UFOs, will definitely not tell a thing about UFOs to Donald Trump, absolutely not, because they're at war with him. Yet did, in a better time, a more conducive time to keeping people informed and doing their proper job, the intelligence services provided a 3-day seminar at Camp David for Ronald Reagan. A project folder was produced with a summary of the UFO question, and about, it would have been quite a few decades later, being a conduit for the deep state, for someone who still cares about whether we should know or not and thinks we should. It is urgent for a number of reasons that we really know what's going on, because it's all about our origin and what we are, which determines really where we're going. And she was asked to go to Kirkland Air Force Base, where she was in this building, this office or something, and a man said to her, "You've got to sit there at that desk and I will let you read a report that was given to Ronald Reagan, a 3-day seminar at Camp David simply to educate him, one man, the then president. And he said, you cannot take notes, you can't photocopy, and you've got to sit at that desk while you're reading this, okay? And I'm going to sit here and supervise you to make sure you don't tear pages out or anything like that, okay? So, but I'm letting you look at the report, the results of the seminar, the discussion, the educational trip to Camp David for Ronald Reagan, okay? She has a good memory for written material, and she was able to quote much of the report verbatim. And one of the things is going to warm the cockles of your heart if you are an anti-evolution buff and you can shoot holes in the crackpot random mutation theory that produces everything given enough time, which is a preposterous notion, and it's really an admission that science hasn't got a clue where we came from. Well, mainstream science is like that. But one of the lines in the reports actually said to Ronald Reagan, and now she's reading it out from memory, she says, forget evolution. We did not evolve. Upright walking hominids existed, and they were genetically modified to produce us. Seemingly some kind of slave race. Maybe. That's her conjecture at the time while she's telling this wonderful story. But the report said, forget evolution. We're not involved in that. We were made, we are produced. Okay? So, why and what for will be the question next. Was it a slave race to work in the gold mines like that idiot Zachariah Zitkin says? No. She says, from all her studies talking to abductees and what they do and what happens to them and all the information she's gleaned over the years with help from the deep state occasionally, that Earth is some kind of like a wildlife reserve for genetic experiments, including metaphysical experiments. And we are supervised. There's interventions that we may not even be aware of from about 5 extraterrestrial entities who were described in the report to Ronald Reagan. I'll list them here for you on screen. And there's something about origins and where we are today in our current genetic engineering which might put us in a kind of premium position to make us realise what we really are. The report said to Ronald Reagan that there's actually 5 species of these off-world entities. They're all upright walking. Some of them look like, wait for it, Nordic people, pale skin, blonde hair. They look like us. Some of them look like greys, and there's more than one type of grey. There's hostile greys and there's greys who are drones. Those are mostly the greys that we encounter, okay? They're kind of like work droids, something like that. There's one group of these Nordic extraterrestrial entities that care about our development and our survival. They come from one place. I'll get that for you. The first 4 kinds are actually produced by the senior alien group. They are able to do genetic engineering to produce the next 3 types of alien on the list. Okay, so it's beginning to look like maybe all the upright walking intelligent species that can do space travel, etc., are created by a senior group. This doesn't take away God at all. This could mean that they're all basically working for God to boost their own knowledge of themselves and other species. It's a knowledge explosion, and it would be a privilege to be asked, why don't you make that zebra more intelligent, make it able to do this, this and that. Wonderful, sort of 10,000-year project for you, your people. There's a fly in the ointment. Some of these alien entities are sympathetic to our cause and our survival, and the fifth one in the list, they are called archaloids. I didn't quite follow her pronunciation. Archaloid or acaloid. I'll write it down the best I can for you on this screen. And they are hostile to us. They are hostile to us. They come from somewhere else, Constellation Draco or something. And they are very hostile to us, and we've been given warnings about this in amazing places such as crop circles, right? Am I confusing you? All these things come together. There's been a recent breakthrough in crop circle understanding because the coding's getting simpler and simpler. There was a lecture in Sydney by a Caltech scientist who shows you that there's actually 8-bit binary codes being provided around the edge of some recent crop circles. Like they're making communication a lot easier than it's ever been. So that's where some warnings have been coming from very recently about beware of Greeks bearing gifts, and that's referring to the alien entities that Eisenhower made some deals with about technology transfer, and you can keep mutilating people and kidnapping people, that sort of thing, mutilating cattle, etc. And apparently they have reneged on the deal, and we have suffered for that. And the other distressing thing is that the deep state have kept all the knowledge they've gained absolutely secret, much to the detriment of humanity. So I'll give you a link about that if you've got the time to watch it. Here's another hour-and-a-half lecture worth listening to. Now, the fifth listed alien entity that interacts with us, though you may never see them, a few people do see them. They are fifth on the list, hostile to us, and they look like, they're called archaloids for a reason. They are basically upright standing insects. They look like giant grasshoppers. And Whitley Strieber said he's encountered those. He used to be taken as a child. He had missing time and all that business. And he used to go and sit in the classroom and be instructed when he was a child by one of these archaloids. And he said a notable feature of them was that they stink to high heaven. Now, what do a lot of insects do? Just think about it. They don't eat. They actually live on the body fluids of other creatures. Spiders certainly do that. And it is conjectured by people who are across this field and put all the evidence together that blood from mutilated cattle is used as food for these insectoid archaloids, okay, who are one of the intelligent entities administering the theme park Earth, the wildlife refuge Earth, which is basically a long breeding experiment and all kinds of other things. That's why so many UFOs are caught doing soil samples, and it's believed that the coring of genitals and strategic parts of cattle is to look for impurities in the soil, toxins in the food chain, etc. That we are responsible for what we do with our out-of-control technologies. So, have I answered some of your questions so far? I hope I have. Another part of her lecture states that the 5 entities that are sort of involved in using Earth as a kind of great big laboratory, they make wars on each other because who's in charge and who's got certain powers is often resisted and resented, and you actually get wars between these alien entities, and also they can fight through us. They can fight through us, using us as proxies. They have some control over us. By the way, another little aspect of the insectoids that live on body fluids of cattle, they can disguise themselves as Nordic blondes. The second level of alien revealed in that listing you had on screen a while back. Okay? So, it's confusing, isn't it? We know some of them are on our side, but some of them are definitely not. Now, one of these I discovered in a book written in 1998 by none other than Ingo Swann. He encountered one of these Nordic blonde aliens in a car park outside a shopping mall, and a number of other people were there that he knew, security people of the deep state. They were chasing this thing that was disguised as a woman. She knew she was discovered straight away. An interesting thing about all of these, off-world entities, is that they can all feel us remote viewing them. But we can't feel ourselves being remote viewed. So they are more psychically sensitive. And in the 1998 self-published book that Ingo Swann put out, where he didn't know where he was going, but he was a security man with a lot of money and power, took him to a secure place and said, I want you to review these targets. And Ingo Swann found himself on the moon, on the dark side of the moon, looking at some strange photographed sort of monolithic ruins with flat sides, which were clearly intelligently built. But what Ingo Swann saw was that, to his utter surprise, aliens doing something like a project like digging or something, and one of them looked up and saw and pointed at Ingo Swann, who was only remote viewing there. They all turned to look at him. It terrified the living daylights out of him. It's the first time he'd ever seen aliens, and he had no idea whether they could harm him, kill him, or what. So he was instructed to leave that area very quickly, and he did. But that's an important feature, all these off-world entities. They can feel themselves being remote viewed, and when you remote view entities a long time away, there's an insectoid ET involved in the building of the pyramids, and it's a female, and a remote viewer was sensed by it, and the damn thing addressed the remote viewer and said, look, this is not your business. Run away. A kind of scolding tone from an insectoid alien building the pyramids. So pyramids were involved, aliens were involved in some construction of some pyramids around the world, okay? It's tantalising information to join up. Join the dots and sit there and make your own personal theory up. Watch a couple of videos. I hope I've joined a few dots for you here so far. I hope this is entertaining you, but engaging you with a more accurate understanding of what's going on around you and what you're part of, and that our petty politics is just crazy that we're all glued to at the moment. Though I think it's vital to keep an eye on what's going on in our own societies. It's very small in the big picture. One of the things that Linda Moulton Howe asked, looking up from the report, was, one riveting line was, alien entities have been involved in biological experiments and terraforming going back 270 million years. That stopped her in her tracks. She looked up at the supervisor at Kirkland Air Force Base, where she's sitting at the desk, remember, and she said, what happened 270 million years ago? And the supervisor said, sorry, we just can't tell you that, it's just too sensitive. So, that's a surprise, isn't it? So, are we a created slave race? Possibly, but we are just getting to the point where we may be able to take a hand in our own genetic evolution, our own genetic makeup, and also create other races, because we're just about on the cusp of being able to do that ourselves from already existent animals. Hell, we might be able to produce a better human, and stop people becoming psychopathic elites. How about that? Would that be a good idea? Could we stop people doing that? Give them always a dash of altruism and that sort of thing, and a dash of humility might help some of the elites who are hell-bent on destroying the human race, don't you think? Maybe you can instill those characteristics permanently in people via DNA programming. I don't really know. Now, what else can I tell you? Just little bits and pieces that you can sew together yourself. One of them is the 5 entities listed. I'll put them on screen probably for you here. There's 2 versions of the Nordics, okay? There's the insectoid, the alkaloids, which can pose as a Nordic, and then there's some people of genuine Nordic appearance. They've been encountered in numerous UFO encounters, okay? They're reported. Now, how does that connect with anything? Well, Linda Moulton Howe says Hitler rose in the 30s promising to replace the Hebrew race with Nordic-looking people. She is suggesting that there's some kind of intervention there, and it's faintly possible that we're not all completely responsible for our own actions. And I can tell you this: remote viewers have reviewed the personality of Adolf Hitler, and guess what they found? They found an entity that snarled at them because it felt it was being remote viewed. One of the remote viewers said he's already done this mass slaughter thing somewhere else on another planet. So he was brought in by God knows what, with God knows what intentions. But there was an attempt, it would seem, which may have been an alien takeover. I'm not certain. But we've been used as proxies in some of the wars between who's in charge of this planet, because the hierarchy of control and privilege is not accepted by everybody in the power pyramid, and it's kind of like there's bubbling disagreements all the time. And she's saying that it's maybe our history, which has been very turbulent for no obvious reason sometimes, is actually proxy warfare for these warring entities from outer space. I think the farewell message in the interview is the one of the perennial you've always heard about, the Disclosure Project, where the group of aliens who care about us, our metaphysical development, our long-term survival, are beginning to actually intervene more directly in our society to force disclosure of all the knowledge and all the technology that's been kept hidden by the deep state. Okay, that's the farewell message in this interview. And I'll be giving you a kind of timeline of the interview. There'll be some subtitles, and you can go to any particular part of the interview to save yourself a lot of viewing time. And I commend it to you if you got the time to sit and watch the lady in the pink hat for an hour and a half. It's very entertaining and a wonderful diversion from American politics. So I'll leave you for now, and I hope I've entertained you for a bit. Steve here in Sydney, over and out.